and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're all well. Happy Halloween. Ooh, happy Halloween. Today's video, nothing to do with Halloween, but it is my October wrap-up. It is the books that I read in the month of October. I'm going to be running through them. There was 9. It felt for a while that there was more than 9, but I think it's because I mentioned a few books in my September wrap-up that I'd read at the beginning of October. So I've only got myself to blame, but there are 9 books. I will start with the books that I don't have physically here with me and then move on to the books that I do have, which means we're a bit out of time order, but hey, we're all fine with that. The first one is an audiobook I listened to. It is the audiobook of Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson. I listened to this earlier on in the month because I wanted to also read the non-fiction sort of account of the fictional book that Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit. I've made that much more complicated than it needs to be. Jeanette Winterson wrote a novel when about a young girl growing up in the north of England whose name was Jeanette, and this is that very novel, and I really enjoyed it. There were some parts in it where I was really like tickled by it and warmed by it, and Jeanette herself narrates the audiobook, which I quite enjoyed, but I didn't love it. I gave it 3 stars, which is like good for me. It's good for me, but I didn't love it. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars and feel like I will read if you... Why Be Happy When You Could Be Normal is the non-fiction companion, I guess, to that book. The next book I read that I don't have here with me because I've lent it to my colleague is Strangers in Iceland, Names for the Sea by Sarah Moss, which is a non-fiction book. This is my 3rd reading of it now, and every time I read it, I love it even more. It is a non-fiction book about Sarah Moss, who's an author. She wrote The Tidal Zone. Most recently, she's written Ghost Wall. Fantastic author, absolutely love her. Her and her husband and their 2 young sons decided to move to Iceland for a year for her to take up a post at the University of Reykjavik. And this is her account of that trip that they took, and them trying to find a house in Reykjavik, somewhere to live in Reykjavik, and getting used to Icelandic ways of living and culture, visiting various places, the Icelandic folklore, food. Oh my God, I absolutely love it. And there was a moment in here where I was reading this book, and it's a paperback book, the edition that I've got, with no pictures in, and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if they had some pictures in this of like the places where she talks about, for instance, the volcano and the Northern Lights and things. And I thought, do you know what? Actually, no, you do not need those pictures, because she just paints such a gorgeous picture of Iceland and Reykjavik, and you can imagine it so perfectly in your mind's eye. She's just her words are just beautiful and fantastic. I absolutely love it. I mean, I've reread it. This is my 3rd time of rereading it since I bought it. Not last year, the year before. I've read it every year, and I feel like I will continue to read it every year. It really gets me into the autumnal spirit, in terms of it being like set in a cold country and things like that. I just really love it, and if it's non-fiction travel writing you're after, then I would definitely recommend that. The only thing I will say is that I wish they did it in audiobook, because I would love to listen to that on audiobook, particularly narrated by Sarah herself. And also, like, my pronunciation of the names of places and people is just shocking, so it would be really nice to actually hear some of the names and people pronounced correctly. So those are the 2 books that I've read that I don't have with me. The rest I have here. The first one is a poetry collection. It is Running Upon the Wires by Kate Tempest. This was kindly sent to me by the publisher. Do you know what? I bloody loved this. I read this on National Poetry Day. I read it in one sitting with a cup of tea, and I really loved it. Now, this poetry collection it's all about one subject. So it's about falling out, like breaking up with a partner, and then the time spent between trying to get over that last partner before you meet someone new and fall deeply in love with them. And I just loved that as like the journey it took you on. The journey it took you on. My favourite poem, I will read it to you. It is about halfway through the collection, and it's about starting something with someone new, and it's called I Want to Be Starting Something, I've Got to Be Starting Something. I sleep in our stains, your shapes in my hands, all day transported. The planets are watch on the dresser, dazed in new cities. I'm with you, I'm close when you want me. It's so good to miss you. Things that we never expected to blossom, reluctant spring of my love. Back for a spin, I'm leaving on Sunday. Life in the space between strangers that stare at the stage. I keep you warm in my jacket. I put you on with my socks in the morning. I kiss my cup when I drink my coffee. And I just love that. But I put you on with my socks in the morning is just such a adorable thing to say about someone. I loved it, and I gave this 5 stars. Really enjoyed that. So that was the first one. The next one is another reread. It is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Now, although this is a reread, this is the first time that I'd read the illustrated edition of this, and I bloody loved it. I think it is, so far, of the 3, I think this is the best illustration so far. I don't really want to ruin it for you guys. I will show you one, because what I find is I really try to avoid looking through the illustrations before I actually get to it. I might treat myself with one, but it's really nice to discover them as you go along. So I'll show you this one, and this is all the hippogriffs, looking absolutely fantastic. And one other thing I will show you that I really liked about this, and I don't feel like this happened in previous books, which I should have bloody checked before I decided to show you, but each chapter has the chapter title written on some the typography is on top of an illustration that has something to do with what's going on in the chapter, and I really like that touch. And I don't feel like that's happened, or if it has happened, I haven't noticed it before, because I feel like the illustrations and things in this book have just really blown it out the water. Absolutely fantastic. 5 stars as ever. The next one was a 4-star book for me, and a new book for me, not a reread, and something I really like. I said this, I'm going to move you down a bit, guys. That's better, isn't it? I said this when I was talking about this in my currently reading, because it's difficult to say that you're enjoying a book that is about some horrific events that have gone on in history. And The Red Ribbon by Lucy Adlington follows a 14-year-old girl, Ella, who is in she's been sent to a place called Birchwood, which in reality is Auschwitz. Ella, while she's there, is making dresses for the commanders' wives and things like that. She meets a friend called Rose, and yeah, I just thought it was so powerful and so fantastic. It's written by someone who is a fashion historian, so in terms of like the detail and the information that goes into what they're talking about when it comes to the dresses and things like that is just like fantastic. The actual story itself is like heartbreakingly sad, but with quite a lot of hope at the end, which I really liked and appreciated, especially as this is a YA book. So I feel like it really gets the message across of how horrific things were, but doesn't leave you in the way that it's a YA book, it doesn't leave you thinking that there wasn't hope for some of the survivors from Auschwitz. So I found this really valuable and would definitely recommend this, particularly for people who are looking at women during war as well. I feel like that's quite a small representation when you read fiction or even non-fiction about the wars. So yeah, very powerful, valuable, would recommend 4 stars. The next one I read was another reread. Quite a lot of rereads this month, and it was Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is I was reading this for the Gothic read along, and actually I enjoyed this. I sort of went, I picked this from the Gothic read along. I was like, oh, I'll definitely read that because I own it and I like to read it, and potentially I didn't read it last year, but I've definitely read it like a number of times around Halloween. But I actually really enjoyed it this time. I gave it probably like a 3.5 stars. One of the things I kept thinking about when I was reading it is how bloody, like, this was written like 200 years ago, and it could have been written now. Like, the language, although slightly dated, it's not like I'm not really having to pick through it. I can easily, it's an easy read in terms of a classic for me. And yeah, just the ideas that the idea, like, imagine having that idea now that somebody, a scientist could create a living body from other dead bodies. Like, imagine having that thought now for a film or for a book, like that original thought. Then imagine what it must have been like 200 years ago, having that thought and writing it down in a book. I really enjoyed this the second time around, and actually I meant to, and I will at some point, but just when it's not, I don't have to pay to rent it, watch a couple of adaptations of Frankenstein, because I would be very interested. And there's one that's got James McAvoy and Daniel Radcliffe in it, which I'd be quite interested to watch. It's also got Andrew Scott in, who I often say is mine and David's favourite actor. So yeah, really thought that was good. 3.5 stars. The next one, actually, I'll do these two next to each other, because I had a bit of a strange experience, really. So I read Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, which is a short science fiction novella about a girl who is, her name's Binti, and she is the first of her race of people, the Himba people, to go to university, a place called Umza University. She's offered a place there. I can't really tell you much in terms of plot points, because like how short it is, and if I tell you something, then that's probably like the whole book. So you follow her journey on the way to University, and I really love this. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I absolutely had high hopes. I was so delighted that I loved it as much as I did, having not really read much science fiction before and being excited to read some science fiction. So I loved that. Then I went to my local library and they had books 2 and 3. So I don't know how many there's going to be in the series, but I know 2 and 3 are out at the moment. So I picked them up, and as soon as I got home, I started on the second one, which is Binti Home. And again, I can't really tell you much what goes on here because it will ruin what happens in the first book. So in this book, Binti is visiting home, which is quite a sort of fraught time for her because her family in Binti, her family were not happy about her going to University. So this is her going back home. But I'll be honest, there was points in this, and this may well be me, it may well be me, but I was completely lost. I did not know what was going on. I thought, what's happened here? Like, there was bits in it where I just felt like I'd missed like pages of stuff, and I hadn't. And as I said, it may well be me, but I've gone from giving that a 4 star to giving this a 2 star, and the two stars I feel were based on like the first few pages where I was well aware of what had just happened in Binti because I just finished it. So yeah, I was disappointed. I have got the 3rd one out from the library at the moment, and potentially when I've finished my other 2 books, I will get on with that. But maybe I need to dedicate some time to it because, yeah, as I said, like there were points in this where I was completely lost. So if you have read Home, do let me know if you felt the same way about that, because I feel like that might be something that is my problem more than it is this book. I'm well aware of accepting that it might be something that I was doing, but yeah, I just felt a bit lost towards some points in it. Lighting changed, the sun's just gone round to this window, so that's what's happening. Then the last book, 5 stars, guys. Absolutely bloody loved this book. So this is the proof copy of A Keeper by Graham Norton, which I was very thrilled to be sent earlier on this year and am excited about. And I listened to the audiobook of A Keeper, which is narrated by Graham Norton himself, which, if you're not from the UK, Graham Norton is a chat show host and a radio show host. He's an Irish chap, hilarious, has been on TV for years, absolutely fantastic. He's in Father Ted, like in a few episodes, which are my very favourite episodes, but he's recently started writing novels, and he wrote Holding, which is a novel that I also listened to on audiobook a few years ago, very much enjoyed, sort of like a cosy crime story about a small Irish village that discovers some human remains on a building site. This was amazing. So the plot itself, I was absolutely gripped. I had no idea what the plot was, aside from a woman called Elizabeth who was returning to Ireland after her mother's death. That's all I knew, and I was excited about that because I love books set in Ireland, and I knew that I enjoyed Holding. But the plot in this, there is so much going on, and it's so fantastic. He writes so amazingly. He really is such a fantastic writer, and there's hilarious bits, and there's really touching bits, and there's really descriptive bits, and then there's really punchy dialogue, and I just adored it. Now I'm desperate to talk to you about what the actual plot is, but if you want to go into this blindly, as I did, not knowing anything that's going on in the book, then go away now and come back when I beckon you back, because the plot itself, I can't not tell you about it because it's like bloody amazing gossip. So go away now if you're not interested, and I'll beckon you back when you're good to come back. So the plot of this book is that it follows Elizabeth, who is returning to Ireland after her mother's died. I've said that. And then you follow Elizabeth in the present day, and then her mother Patricia in the past. Elizabeth finds some letters that are written from her who she imagines to be her father, who she's never had any contact with, written to her mother, and she's reading them. They're a little bit saucy. There's a bit in there about touching a boob, and a bit in there about passionate kissing, and she can't believe this is her mother that she's reading these things about because she's never seen her mother as someone like that. So that's what you're reading now, and you're like, oh wow. So then when you go back into the past, you find Patricia is not that interested in this chap who's writing her the letters saying that they're having such passionate kisses and he's grazed her boob and all sorts of things. And you follow her journey of her going to visit him. Now, when she goes to visit him, she they just don't really get on. He's very quiet, he doesn't really instigate any conversation, and there's no spark there or anything like that. But one night when she gets there, the mother of Edward, who is the chap that she's writing to, says, why don't you go take Patricia down to the bar for a drink? So he takes her to the bar for a drink. When she gets there, they're not talking at all. And she says, oh, I tell you what, why don't we read each other the horoscopes from the newspaper, and hands him the newspaper. And the chap behind the bar says, don't tease Edward, he can't read or write. Now, who has been writing her these saucy letters? And that is all I will say, guys. Because I want to leave some allure for you. So you can come back now, come back. But, oh my God, I just found it amazing. And I think it's going to be, like, I just feel like this is something I will be recommended to a lot of people. I feel like it will really appeal to a lot of people as well. Because as well as being lovely, like amazingly written and beautiful and really, like, wonderful in terms of like the setting. The two settings are like one of the houses is on the beach and it's got some castle ruins on it and things like that. Like the characters are just so perfectly done as well. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot for everyone in here, and I really loved it. It was 5 stars. It was my favourite book of the month. So those are the books that I read in the month of October. What did you guys read in October? Have you read any of these books that I have here? We'll be very interested. It is Cozy Reading Night, Autumn Cozy Reading Night, this Friday, the 2nd of November, between 7 and 10 p.m. If you do not know what this is about, I will link my announcement video down below, but that's just a reminder. And on Friday in the morning, I will be putting up my TBR, what I plan to read on that evening, and then I'll be active on Twitter and Instagram throughout using the hashtag Cozy Reading Night. I hope to see you all there, and I will see you all again soon for another booktube video, for another booktube video.